For those new to my channel, I have spent the past month or so uploading the best arcade games and their home computer, console and portable conversions, which came with them at the time, roughly around the early 1980s up to the 1990s. If you owned a Commodore 64, FM Towns or even a Sega Mega Drive, you would likely have had either a port of a particular game you were really pleased with or desperately disappointed with. And if you had the Chase HQ Ocean port for Commodore 64, then you clearly had a bad day. This is the second in this sub-series of arcade ports where we're looking at aftermarket releases, or known more commonly as homebrew games. Due to the immense popularity of the first video I uploaded a couple of days back, and many more new games to go through, here we go. We'll be taking a look at many different games here again on several different platforms that range from the Sega Master System up until the Atari 8-bit computers and everything in between. Back in 1991, we had several home computer conversions of the massive and one of the best, if not the very best, arcade beat-em-ups. That's Final Fight. I recently did a ports video for Final Fight a couple of weeks back. Let's just say the Commodore Amiga version by US Gold was nothing really to brag about. In fact, it was pretty shoddy for an Amiga game. Here we have the excellent Final Fight Enhanced. It is fully playable, but we'll say that it does get improvement updates from time to time. This conversion by Prototron is a huge upgrade and revamp of the original game, and it actually took this developer 3 years of learning to code in 6800 assembly language to do this. Like it or not, Prototron has added a few bits and pieces here and there from different Final Fight games, such as the addition of having Mackie as a playable character here too. Firstly, this version contains a proper introduction before the game starts, rather than how the US Gold game just plopped us into the fight immediately after it loaded. Something else noticeable here is the music and sound effects, and this is done to absolute perfection. The developer states that it isn't a perfect arcade conversion by any stretch, but a game on this scale on the Amiga is something to behold in the first place. The colours have also had a slight overhaul too. Sprites also move correctly here, rather than the 1991's weird wobbly moves as they suffered in that game. Final Fight Enhanced is available with both ECS and AGA Amigas, and highly recommended if you fancy playing a conversion you should have really had back in 1991. A day after I released my Bubble Bobble ports video, the Atari XE and XL both received its own conversion of Bubble Bobble. This was actually based on the BBC Micro version, but the team did a hell of a lot of its own coding to maximise the potential of the Atari's graphical and sound capabilities. And of course, the Atari XL is a much more powerful computer in terms of graphics. This conversion by Vega and his team features 100 levels, 2 players can also play simultaneously, and it even has the final boss. But to be honest, I never got to level 100 on the Commodore 64 or NES versions I both played as a kid. This is a great conversion, and the music and sound effects production matches the arcade original as well as it could do given its hardware. It works on both NTSC and PAL Atari computers, but admittedly runs better on PAL systems. One thing that did stick out with this port is the sheer difficulty level, and that's not a bad thing at all, because normally those games you have played over and over again through the years kind of loses its difficulty to some extent. So playing this kind of felt refreshing to not just simply walk through the first 10 levels so easily. Although Commando for the Commodore 64 was actually released back in 1985 by Elite, admittedly it wasn't perfect, like many argued in my Command Arcade ports video I did a while back. A few issues with the original release was its easiness with low level difficulty, and of course a game this short could have benefited with that level of toughness ramped up just to make it last a little bit longer. This 2015 release, titled as Commando Arcade, certainly made this version much harder for sure. Around this time we also got Ghosts and Goblins Arcades, which I covered in the last video, and the quality of this is on par with Ghosts and Goblins Arcades. Absolutely superb stuff. We have new graphics here, and things really do just resemble the arcades game that much more. We have a choice with sound here too. We can either enable new music and sound effects, the original Rob Hubbard music, or just sound effects alone. The new sound effects, which is what I use in this gameplay, are just awesome. The helicopter introduction into Mission 1 sounds amazing, and the cherry on the cake with Commando Arcades for Commodore 64 is that this version includes the missing levels, which we didn't get originally in the 80s. This likely is the best 8-bit version of Commando, and it's highly recommended. Growing up, my mum and dad had an Atari 2600, and I used to play Pac-Man, which came as a pack-in game with that set. Now, as a very young kid, I likely thought this was awesome, but in reality, with grown-up eyes, I can see why many have thought of it as a terrible conversion originally, and it truly was. So here we are with Pac-Man 8K, and damn, what an improvement. We get a proper introduction screen rather than just plugging in the cartridge and going straight into the game. The big standout feature here is the actual music and sound effects, and just remember, as basic as this sounds, the Atari 2600 isn't really known for music of this quality. We even get a little animation after finishing stage 2 like I did. Sprite flickering is here, but nowhere on the scale of the original release. And finally, the colours aren't particularly bland and pale looking here either. Easily, out of the multitude of clones for the Atari 2600, this Pac-Man 8K game is the definitive version you need for Atari 2600 fans. But fear not, I don't think we are going to have a game crash again in 2025. Now, firstly, this game was last updated around a year back. That isn't to say, though, that this 4-stage demo won't ever get finished. The developer over on itch.io has left a message saying it will be finished in the future. So, as for Mega Drive having a version originally, it surprisingly never actually happened. Given the specs of the Sega 16-bit console, it likely would have pulled it off pretty well too. But after all this time later, we can finally play what the creator names as Mega R-Type. And awesome is an understatement. The Robos who is developing this port has made this as faithful to the arcades game as much as humanly possible. Now, surprisingly, the Mega Drive isn't afraid of multi-scrolling, and this version uses that to its advantage. It is smooth and very responsive. After playing a few stages, music-wise, it does sound slightly different, but then again, some conversions won't be 100% perfect due to difference in hardware being used. We have options in this version as used by the PC Engine's version, as well as the amazing R-Type dimensions. I am seriously hoping that this gets a full release soon. It will likely be as greatly received as the recent Final Fight conversion. The Commodore Plus 4 has had a fairly active community for a long time now, and every now and again we are presented with something truly spectacular and extraordinarily high in quality. Arkanoid, of course, a massive hit originally back in 1986, and certainly one of Taito's best arcade games. This version is actually known as Arkanoid Plus 4. Now, most home computers and even consoles had a conversion of the arcade game back in the day. Some great and some not too bad. The Commodore Plus 4 was a computer which didn't get a version back then. This 2021 release is likely just as good as some of the best home conversions from back then, if not better. And really, if you didn't know any better, you would likely have guessed this was likely on the Commodore 64 rather than the Commodore Plus 4. The music in opening is truly spectacular, and the gameplay is just as good too. The physics used here are amazing, and the game is a complete joy to play. Next up, we have got Shinobi Remaster for the Amstrad CPC. For those of you who wasn't too keen on the original Amstrad release back in the late 1980s, you now have the opportunity to play a much better port of it. A big noticeable difference here is the sprite that you control. Now, originally he had almost a bent appearance, kind of like he was constantly looking really awkward as you walked along. The user FMTRX over on CPC Wiki, who remastered it, explained that this was a really annoying feature of the release back in the day. So first thing that he had to remaster was the main sprite itself. Afterwards, a whole new change of colour happened too, where sure enough, this remastered version looks so much better for it too, as well as a revamp of certain textures that look better for it. In addition to Shinobi, other particular enemy sprites have been reworked too here. This released back in 2020, and according to the CPC wiki post, new updates for the game was supposed to be in progress, but I'm not sure if the person making this remaster has given up, so I'm not sure there. But regardless, it's a great game, and I'll also note here that bonus stages haven't been touched but left as how it was originally. Gyruss is a 1983 Konami arcade classic. It has many conversions during the commercial years of the time, such as the C64 and Nintendo Entertainment System, but the MSX wasn't to be until 2017, when it was finally ported over. It's a classic fixed arcade shooter, which will hold a lot of fond memories of this era of arcades for many people. I am personally a sucker for late 1970s and early 1980s classics like this one. So is this MSX conversion really that good? Well, yes it is. It is based on the ColecoVision version of the game. A couple of additions for the MSX side of things is the quality of sound. A loud blaster sound is here in this version, and enemy destruction sounds are added here too. This MSX conversion actually had a physical cartridge released back in 2017. I have no idea if these can still be purchased or if it was a limited run at the time. Regardless, this is a great conversion that handles the source material really well. One of arcade's most iconic games that was ported to several systems in the 1980s, as well as Sega's SG-1000 console, but oddly it never received a official Sega Master System conversion. So finally, we got a very good conversion of this in March 2024, named as Bombjack the Remake. Although the gameplay area scrolls here vertically, that doesn't mean to say this is a terrible version at all. Of course, the original 1984 gameplay screen was single screen. This is truly a great effort and was even given a coding competition entry too when it came out. Everything here besides the scrolling is as arcade great as it can get for the Sega Master System game. I highly recommend this one for 8-bit Sega fans. The user Pac-Man Plus over on the Atari Plus forums provided Atari 7800 users with this near-perfect arcade conversion of Galaxian. The Atari 7800 library consisted of just under 60 games in total, so to have new titles like this one emerging is a really good thing. And like I said in volume 1 of this new sub-series I'm doing, I am beginning to grow pretty fond of how good the Atari 7800 actually was, and by playing this embeds that statement further. Classic arcade games like Space Invaders and even Galaxian aren't short for clones or remakes, but not all of them are brilliant. This is a completely solid port, and the music and sound effects even sound like the real thing. The developer behind this literally grabbed the graphics from the 1979 arcade game and converted them for the Atari 7800. There are a few minor cutbacks such as colours of flagships, but at the end of the day conversions are conversions, and sometimes sacrifices need to be made. This is a fantastic effort from Pac-Man Plus, and I recommend this version truly. Surprisingly, the Commodore Amiga never actually had an arcade conversion of Wonder Boy for the Amiga. Most home computers did, but this wasn't done at the time. It could have been a wise idea not to port it. During my Wonder Boy ports video I did a while back, there were some really awful ports of this game. I am playing this on the Amiga CD32, but it's also available for standard Amiga computers too, with at least 1 mega RAM. The developer, known as Acid Bottle, has finalized this game by the scenes of it as I'm recording this video. It plays well, it's using an awesome Scorpion engine, which is why Amiga has some really nice games coming out nowadays. As you will see, it's bright and the music and sound effects are really nicely done here too. The scrolling and pace is top notch here. Like most of the games covered in this video, Amiga fans got a port of this a couple of years back. Was it really worth the wait? Well, absolutely, undoubtedly. If this was released back in the 1980s, this would have been one of the best ports around at the time, as it looks and sounds almost identical to the arcade game itself. Some people have commented that Wonder Boy doesn't have the right weight when he jumps and then lands, but personally, I didn't have an issue with this. I think it controlled really nicely. Any Wonder Boy or Amiga fan should definitely check this one out.